So I've had a new realization over the last 6 months that you have to be a rocket scientist to be able to operate the mics given out by any AV company in this country. It doesn't matter which banquet hall, doesn't matter what quality of AV system, but to get the mic working in the first go and for it to work flawlessly over the next 24 hours, we will all need to be rocket scientists. And since we aren't, I'm apologizing up front for each time your mics misbehave. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to our 5th CSO Summit. I was talking to a few people outside and we were debating when we really started this event and how it has grown to where it has, and I suddenly realized that yes, it is actually 5 years old and feels like a little bit of a landmark, and most people in this room have played a big role in us getting where we are today, so thank you very much for being here. For some of you who don't know me, I'm Anuradha Mathur. I'm one of the founders of 9.9 Media, and 5 years ago, I think we got a little bit lucky, and some of it may go to the fact that we might focus a little bit more on content and trends and observations of the business environment than some others in this space. When we realized that, in fact, I remember this was at a conversation in our company where I said that, there's so much focus on emerging technologies. Everybody is constantly talking about enterprise technology and what is the new thing on the horizon. And it was almost like a flash of light that every time there is a conversation about a new emerging technology for enterprises, somebody is going to ask the question, how secure and how safe? And that really was the genesis of us starting to think, who is that person in an organization that is going to answer that question? Great technology, yes. How secure and how safe? And can I expose my organization to this technology? If I do, what do I need to do to ensure that the organization stays secure? And that was really our first insight into the fact that the role and the function of the CISO or the CSO is actually only going to grow from strength to strength. It gives me great pleasure that we were right. And the dramatic change in the numbers, the responsibility, and the engagement of this community in the last 5 years actually just has been testimony to what we thought 5 years ago sitting in a room. The 5th summit is titled Adapting Enterprise Security to New Realities. And maybe this is what the theme should be every year, because no reality stays for 12 months anymore. Right? Things change very rapidly. And I think that's the reason why we feel the need to have created a forum, because there are no answers in history. None of you can look back to predecessors. Most of you don't have a predecessor. And that's the reason why we feel that having created a forum like this is a big step forward in the role and the emerging and the evolving responsibilities that CISOs will have to complete in their organizations. We've spent time putting this agenda together. We are hoping that it is going to bring to the fore stuff that each of you is challenged by in your organizations, you're grappling with. And the idea is there will be people at the table who will facilitate the discussion, but the wealth of experience and wisdom is on that side. It's in this room, and therefore please share your experiences, share your challenges, share what is on your mind, so that each of you go back tomorrow evening feeling richer and better equipped to delivering on your role. There are a couple of new things we are trying this time. The first thing and the first session, I'm going to welcome our panelists in a short while, is at 9.9 and at the CSO Forum, we've been feeling that there needs to be some work that we do at our end that allows us to track how things are changing in this community. So we launched a security survey a couple of years ago. It was small. We've tried to make it bigger this year. But the more important thing is that in our company, one of the advantages we have is of different communities and their perspectives on each other. We work very closely with CIOs, we work very closely with CFOs, we work very closely with CEOs, and this year in our annual survey, we've actually tried to get a reflection of what other people believe about the importance and the state of the security function in companies. So our annual security survey is one of the new things which we've extended to the CXO community, and you will see the results and importance of social media. So I'd like very much that at the end of the day, when you leave, you will see that anyone who doesn't have their Twitter handle at the base of their names is one step behind where we would like. There's a lot of information and a lot of exchange in terms of solutions, problem solving that can come through a better engagement on social media. We'd like to encourage that between today and tomorrow. And the third thing is that to try and get your responses as this conference progresses, we've got a polling software. We're going to put things up and we're going to ask you questions so that we get very quick feedback in addition to a show of hands to see how what we believe is tracking against what each of you sitting in the room feels. With that, I'd like to welcome you all. And our first session, we have a small video that has been produced in-house which I'm going to play before we start the session formally.
FAA just issued a critical alert. The entire network went down.
3 months ago, you lost the drive containing the identity of every agent embedded in terrorist organizations across the globe.
Transportation system's crashing and they just hit the entire financial sector.
You have no idea who you're dealing with.
Let the hacking begin.
What the hell is that?
I'm your new quartermaster.
You must be joking.
Why? Because I'm not wearing a lab coat?
Because you still have spots.
I'll hazard I can do more damage on my laptop sitting in my pajamas before my first cup of Earl Grey than you can do in a year in the field.
Right. So as we were debating what the theme for the new CSO summit should be, lots of fun film, and realized that all the thrillers and all the movies that have been released in the last 12 to 18 months have had a big component of cyber security and cyber crime in it. And that is the new reality. And while we are stretching to make the point, I think you all have a big task at hand, and we hope that we will end the next 2 days with you feeling just a wee bit more in control than you did so far. With that, I'd like to invite our first two panelists for the day, Sameer Ratolikar, CISO, Bank of India, and Mr. Bala Subramaniam. To the rise, please join me in welcoming our guest speakers. Rachit, who editorially leads our digital, our portal, and has come back to join 9.9 after spending a year in England, and in the last month, I think, has met, about 100 CISOs and CIOs, has actually put together this survey, so I'm going to ask him to share his findings.
Thank you. Right, so we'll start with who all responded to this survey. You can see that we had 39% of people were part of mid-sized companies, and a large chunk was from large-sized companies. Manufacturing, BFSI, IT, ITS, well represented, and all the others, pharma, retail, auto, are less than 5% each. The interesting thing is that who looks after security in these organizations? 37% of them have a CISO. 28% it is the CIO slash CTO looking at. The good thing though is that 60% of the people who responded to our survey were actually in charge of security in their organizations, whether they were CISOs or not. There were three broad emerging themes that came out from the survey. One was this focus on security's alignment with business. Now, whether it is the CISO talking or the other CXOs talking, there was a stress on aligning security with business. Then there was this whole focus on compliance and threats from new technologies, social, BYOD. And third was the CISO's business and leadership skills, which were, under test, as we've put it. But before we get into all the messy stuff, we thought we should share the good news first. 94% CXOs have a positive outlook of security landscape. They actually believe that security is going to improve in the future. And 76% CXOs now trust their own data more than they did previously, thanks to the regulations and like SOX and PCI. But the question that we should answer in this summit is, should they be confident? Do they have enough reason to be confident? I'll just throw some facts. I don't know if these are good numbers or bad numbers. 55% organizations have a governance structure in place to deal with information security and risk management. I don't know whether I should say only 55% or it's a good number. 59% have a training and awareness program on security for employees. 47% CISOs feel that they're understaffed. So half the CISOs out there actually feel that they're understaffed to handle those risks that they deal with every day. And 62% CISOs have less than 5 years experience in leading with security teams. Now the risks that you face are mature. So moving on, does your organization have a designated CISO? This is where the story starts. Large organizations, anything above 500 crores, 56% have. And in the smaller, I think the smaller organizations are actually doing well. The next set that we're going to discuss is what the CXOs replied to our survey. These are, mind you, not CIOs. These are not designated CISOs. They are either CFOs, CTOs, directors, but they're not looking at security. So the thing that comes out is that security is a board level concern. 100% of the CXOs who took our survey said that CISO is involved in all major boardroom discussions on risk, compliance, and governance. Not surprising. But 80% of them said that the CISO is also involved in company strategy on board level discussions. And 74% CXOs said that a key priority for a CISO is to keep the board informed, which means that the board always wants to know what's happening, which is why we're saying it's a board level priority. But what is the management so worried about? So this is a typical ratings based question. We have enough responses to say that this should be indicative. What stands out is intellectual property protection, compliance, emerging threats from new technology, and compliance to external mandates, and customer data privacy. These are the top ones that I've highlighted. Now this is an interesting question. The next question is about the CISO does these activities that we highlighted below, and we've asked the management to highlight which do they think is of a higher importance to the other. The ones on the left, you can see ensuring compliance, which is what we said is coming out as a trend, that everyone is talking about importance of compliance. Then aligning security with business, this was another trend that came out. Managing emerging threats, ensuring business continuity, and keeping the board informed. If you look closely, 3 of the top 5 are management related. They are leadership and management related topics. They're not technical skills related topic. So that's another trend, that the CISO has been actually being challenged on his management skills and business skills. This is also another question. Which areas would you like the CISO to contribute more on? Now, the big ones, of course, I've highlighted them for you so that we can spend less time here. Similar trends here: align security with business, communicate ROI on security, build a high-performing team, understand and measure business risk. These are all management-related issues. So the management actually wants CISOs to have more business skills, to have more management skills. Does this mean that the CISOs are doing a great job in security? Does this mean that the CISOs are not doing a great job on management? It's for the panel to discuss. So this is now when we come to the CISO's view. So all respondents who were CISOs responded this way. Let's profile them first. Sorry, 62% of CISOs have been in their roles for less than 5 years. This means that 2/3 of the CISOs who are actual CISOs have less than 5 years of experience in leading security teams. Clearly, that's important. Half the CISOs were not part of CISO's team in the previous job. So what I'm trying to get at is that the average tenure of a CISO as a leader is less than 5 years. And even before this, they were actually not part of a security domain. So they are new to security as well. Only 1/4 of the CISOs have more than 10 years of experience. The interpretation, of course, is for you and the panel to discuss. Whom does the CISO report to? 40% to the CIO, CTO. Of course, this reflects the survey. The question that I want to ask is, does this reporting structure serve the organization's best interest or not? 2/3 of people have said something, and 1/3 have said something else. Are there any guesses on what is the red part? Is that a yes or a no? That's a no? That most people are not happy with whom they're reporting to? I was actually surprised to see the opposite. Right, so what is the biggest challenge that the CISO feels he is facing? So what are you guys feeling that you face right now? The biggest challenges, of course, are the ones with the outliers. Again, managing business risks, managing multiple compliance requirements, investigating security incidents, and staffing the security team. 3 of these 4 are, again, management-related things. So clearly the CISOs, it has been, they're perceptive about what the management wants from them. What are the emerging threats from? This is a complete technology-driven area. The tier 1 threats that CISOs are talking about is BYOD, privacy, data protection, and regulatory non-compliance. There is, of course, a second tier, which is third-party risks and application risks, social media risks. What stood out to me was that cloud services is so last year. It's so 2011, we don't talk about it anymore. So what are the new InfoSec initiatives in the organization? So this basically gives you how many % of people are saying that this is the initiative that we're going to start in the near future. So most of them are on data leakage management, user awareness, unified compliance. I'm not sure if it means that the things on the other side, on your left side, have they been taken care of, or they are for a future date? I'm not sure what we can take away from that part. But yes, in the near future, most of the work is going to be on data leakage management, user awareness. It's important because in the next slide, we see that the CISO is spending a lot of time on new initiatives. That's the number one thing there. The CISO is spending a lot of time thinking about his new initiatives, working, planning on those new initiatives. And they happen to be, if I go back, data leakage management and user awareness. So after this, I've come to my last slide after this, which is basically a relook at what the management wants. So this is what the CISO is spending his time on, but this is what the management wants to spend his time on. Ability to understand business and integrate security strategy with it. Ability to build a high-performing and a motivated security team. Ability to keep up with and manage the risks of emerging technology. Ability to communicate ROI on security investment.
Thank you. I'm going to get some responses from our panelists. And as I said, Samir is a CISO. He handles what we are talking about on a day-to-day basis. And we have Mr. Balasubramaniam, who's been a CIO for 35 years, and will obviously bring to the table expectations from a CISO. Do these reflect does it reflect what the survey has put out? And also importantly now, post having run security post having been a CIO for large conglomerates, is now actually advising a lot of mid-sized companies. So I'd like him to bring that experience to the table as well, and then we'll get reactions from the audience. So can I ask Samir to kick off, to comment a little bit on the survey and anything else that you'd like to add?
First of all, is it working?
Yeah,
no.
You have to switch it on.
No, I think it's not. Hello, yeah. So Anuradha, this is, first of all, congratulations for a wonderful survey. I think it covers almost all the points which we come across, as we work in our organizations. So that is something which is, and it's exciting to see, that it covers really the threats, it covers the governance, it covers the risk management, it covers the compliance and all other aspects. So first of all, congrats for that. Secondly, I need to, just have a couple of thoughts, on the entire survey. I think if you analyze the whole survey which is carried out, the important point coming up is the expectations from a CISO, or how a CISO can lead his entire organizations in aligning security with the business, or manage the return on investment in a better way and all. I think one of the important aspect which a CISO has to keep into account is the thought leadership, right? So for any technological decisions, for any new InfoSec strategy, what is the thought process he adopts? Whether he goes on a reactive basis, whether he goes on a peer organization study and then try to deploy technology, or is proactive in nature, he has a lot of visibility into the market, what is happening, and then go for the particular kind of a approach strategy or technology. I think that is one of the most important point. Because the input to this point, why I raise this point is, today we have multiple technologies, right? Today we have access control, we have many, we have DLP, anything, plethora of solutions. Now, if these solutions are installed on endpoints, endpoint is gone. Right? Today I have my DLP agent, I have my antivirus agent, I have my anti-malware agent, I have my network access control agent. I have so many things, right? So one of the important aspects for a CISO is to see that how can he, talk to the industry, convey the issues, through these various forums, through his own research, and see that a unified solution is being provided to the organizations. And it requires a thought leadership and a market study and a complete research. If you do that, then goes up to the top management, saying that, or approach periodically as we go through the survey, then perhaps the top management will have a good confidence, abilities, on the person who is on that chair. That is how, because that is one of the point which was perhaps a little missing directly, but the spirit was the same. So I thought to take it up now.
Bala?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, clear. Rather, I do second the survey is extremely comprehensive, and it covers various aspects and covers not only the CISO himself, but again a lot of the management representatives. It clearly brings out one really thing that that we see these days. There's a complete change in the approach. Two things have changed. One is the business environment, and the risks have changed over the years. And secondly, the very approach towards security. I see a lot of difference in the minds of people, not only the management, but also the security managers themselves. Which is very heartening to see that there is a change is taking place. Now, some parts of the survey look a little too rosy. Okay, all right. My conversation with a lot of CIOs. I'm part of a CIO club that we run. Now, this complete awareness in security and in terms of the connect with the management is still not as good, which is very clearly reflected in the number of CIO, the CISOs, the level of experience that they have to be heading a security division. So that very clearly states that, and there is a bit of a disconnect in terms of the CISOs' involvement in business and be a part of the management committee when they discuss new businesses, new initiatives, and they being a part of it when they design the security systems itself. A lot has changed. For instance, in the early part of my career, I used to take care of security myself. Then I had a network manager take care of it. It is only the last two stints that I had a separate CISO and taking care of them. So the second thing which I normally see is that CISOs, needs to be a holistic view of security. It is just not about certain solutions, certain tools, but in terms of complete understanding. What I would say as a CISO is a custodian of the information assets of the organization. So he has to assume complete responsibilities to see that it is secure. And as Samir really mentioned, that he has to be proactive, he has to move forward, and not only address what some of the business managers tell him, but it also go across and see which are the elements in the organization which still need protection and security, and he has to move in there. So the blueprint that he draws it has to have a strategic connect with the organization's objectives. That is important. I think people will learn as they go along. So I see a great future ahead for CISOs, and I certainly advocate that CISO should be an independent function and shouldn't really be reporting to the CIOs.
One point, perhaps I would like to add.
Just switch on your mic.
Yeah, sorry. One important point is the ability of a CISO to take the risk on his head. As an information risk manager, are we really trying to put the blocks, not directly but indirectly, in the overall IT strategy of our organization? Or are we have the ability, if a CIO tells that this is going to be rolled out, and a CISO thinks that this is going to add a lot of value in terms of the tangible number or profit to the institutions, but the security is not there, come on, let me take as asset risk on my head and then take it forward. I think very few of the person I've met really doing that. So because they say that unless this is done, we can't take it forward. So the risk management part, I think that is you need to have a good balance between risk management and the security, number one. But at the same time, I think it is, 60-40. 60% has to be on the risk management acceptance side, and 40% is the risk management on the deployment side.
Good point. I just wanted to get your reactions very quickly. You saw the sample, and I think, Bala, to your point, this is in some ways a self-selected group. Companies that have an opinion on security typically are companies where it is already important, and companies where there is already a senior CISO are sectors or companies or organizations that have accepted the importance of. So to that extent, the image, I suspect, is rosy, and when you start going out in the world and meeting people, you will see the difference. I don't know whether you agree or IT, ITES, BFSI are clearly, and telecom are clearly leaders in the industry, in the security space. But that is reflective of how any function grows in the economy, because some sectors and some people really do take the lead. I'd like to now get some reactions from the audience. Anyone on stuff that has been said, whether it's in terms of the time that is getting spent, whether it is in terms of expectations of management, whether it is where you see this role going. What is it that you feel you agree with, and what is it that you feel is actually more lip service than the reality that all of you face in your organizations? Yeah. Can you take the mic?
I found three things common. One was there are a lot of CISOs reporting to CTO or CIO, and then they are working in small companies and they are having less than 5 years experience. So all these three things would be going together, because when a company is small and you have a CISO, he will be reporting to CTO, but when a company is large, this thing won't happen. So these three things would be common in those companies.
Okay, although our sample size is much larger, reflective of large organizations.
In fact, it's surprising to see that a lot of, some of BFSI and companies do not have a CISO.
Yeah, that I was quite surprised to hear. There are, Samir,
yeah.
Isn't it mandated now?
It is mandated. In fact, it is mandated by Reserve Bank of India guidelines that a CISO has to report to a risk management, that is Chief Risk Officer. But I think the banks are in the process of implementing it. Yeah.
So I think that will see a big shift in the numbers of just pure designated CISOs going forward. I wanted to actually, before we go to the next question, ask how many of you feel like superheroes? We had this clip at the beginning of the session where you are the next savior on the block. How many of you genuinely feel that you have that kind of a role to play and the risks are actually as close and as indeterminate as, yes? You would feel like a superhero? How many?
Yes, security has become a major contributor to the day-to-day functions of organizations. I come from a manufacturing industry where compliance is not mandatory, but still we see risk every day We see it in our logs, we see attacks happening to us, and we really feel good, we feel satisfied that yes, we are contributing majorly to the organization.
Show of hands, superheroes. How many feel like superheroes?
Maybe I would not want to say as a superhero, but
you all are too modest, it's not going to work.
Okay, no. While I am modest, I am also as strict as possible in my job, so obviously that is a requirement. Just to give you an update, the role of the CISO nowadays is slightly migrating not only from a compliance perspective, it is also slowly migrating into the risk perspective also. While in small companies, CISOs do take care of the risk manager and the role of the compliance manager together. But while we as my organization, I said Collabra, we serve the top 10 banks in the US. So I think the kind of impetus which is given to the security, I think it's far and large. And I think we got no way to really forget that report mechanism of CISO into the CTO. Because a whole lot of risk assessment has to go into, and typically the GRC model, governance, risk and compliance, has to come into model. It's not just putting one solution in place and running after governance part of it at a later point of time, meeting new clients. So the whole model has to be designed before we really roll out any solutions. And
sorry, so are you saying that the CISO has to stop reporting to the CIO? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, but
Anuradha Burgess. I think in the next survey you may need to ask a forward-looking question. What is the role of a CISO evolving into? In the CIO community we have this debate of can a CIO ever become a CEO and what does he need to get to that next level? But it's time CISOs also decide that do they want to be CROs or do they want to be a CIO or a CTO or a CEO? And all the paths are fine, whichever you want to go to. But in the next survey, you may want to have that question of what is the evolution part for mature CISOs to go into.
yeah, good suggestion, and we will do that. I want to just get a reaction to the slide on the board. How many of you agree with the responses we have on this survey that actually every CISO is involved in board level discussions on security, that the board is looking to the CISO for information on an overall security landscape? Do you feel connected with your boards? Or is this, yes? How many, show of hands, how many feel they are connected to the board? So it's a much smaller number than the survey reflects. Which was my gut, but you know, that's what the survey says, and I think the reality is actually different. Yes, Burgess.
Perspective there. While a person may or may not.
Burgess, you're doing something to the mics. You can go wrong with one mic, that's allowed and expected, but you need 3 mics.
All right. So while a CISO may or may not get audience of the board very often, one thing is sure: when the shit hits the fan, he's the one who's going to get called up and asked to explain. That time there'll be no CIOs or anybody else who is why let the risk go through. So whatever connect he may have, whatever frequency, once in a month, once a quarter, once in 6 months, when something goes wrong and the site gets compromised or whatever else, or you have an attack and systems go down through security, he's the one who will be answering to the board and not somebody in marketing who put up a new website.
I want to just get some reactions from non-telecom, non-bank, non-IT, ITES CISOs in the room. How many of you feel that you get the kind of response from your CEO or top management when something goes wrong? Is the kind of thing that Burgess is talking about, that if your site gets compromised or there is a security incident in a telco or a bank, all hell breaks loose? How many people in this room who are non-BFSI, non-telecom feel that you get, that's the kind of? Okay, so obviously the transition has begun. That in many organizations there is the feeling that a compromise on anything that can be viewed as a security incident is big, despite it not being something from the regulatory environment. Yes?
Since you have conducted the survey, I just wanted to understand that across the sectors, I'm sure that security and governance and risk and compliance are important parameters, but as a point of maturity across the sectors, is there any visible trend in terms of like manufacturing is shifting to that, or they are adhering to only base level things but not giving too much importance to aligning their security with the strategy of the business and all? So
I'll comment. Bala, would you like to take that first?
No, generally in my conversations with people, what I've found is, the awareness level, as mentioned on the BFSI side and telecom and a few other, IT companies and all that, the awareness is extremely high. But when we come to manufacturing companies and other companies, I think the level of awareness is much lesser, and the seriousness with which the security is handled is not as much. Because the other factor, which, is very, very visible, that in these organizations, the CISO usually reports to somebody, whether it is a CIO or someone else. So whenever a problem occurs, it's that person who is called and not the CISO.
I think just to add to that, this is the trend that the landscape or the economy follows in every sector. So companies where human capital is paramount, where your entire business, if you're a accounting firm or you're a knowledge-based firm or you're a BPO, the chief human resource officer got much greater importance, and human capital issues get much greater importance than in certain areas where you're asset-based, right? And I think that's the same thing that gets reflected here. Because where it was mandated or it was dictated by your customer who's sitting overseas. So BFSI and telecom is dictated by internal rules, regulations and norms. And ITS, actually a lot of the force came from international customers who forced companies here to be compliant and secure in a certain manner. But the interesting thing is that there will be a band of 10, 15, 20 companies and CISOs who lead the charge. But soon that then becomes the hygiene level for the rest of the economy. And I think we've started to see with this survey, for the first time we are seeing traces in an overall jump, even in manufacturing companies, where there is a recognition and response to security issues. So I think to answer your question, the maturing has begun. Also, we've seen a big trend in, because we make databases all the time, and this is a request on the side, any of you who would like to suggest CISOs that you know or people who handle security in other organizations, please let us know and we will co-opt them into the community. But we have started to find more and more manufacturing companies and non-banks and ITS companies also appoint CISOs in the last 12 to 18 months. So there is a change. Yes, Satish.
I agree with what Anuradha says, because in manufacturing companies, initially the feeling was there's not much to lose. The impact is not much if any compromise or something happens, because they feel that most of them are anyway in public domain. So why to invest more on such securing such assets? But slowly it is changing. Like people have started realizing that it also impacts the business, it also affects the competitiveness. So more and more importance is given. And I personally feel that if we explain it properly to the management from the business perspective, with the perspective of what the business stands to lose in the case of some problems or some compromise, then they definitely agree to that. So that's a shift which is going on in our organization.
It's a big challenge for non-telco and non-finance CISOs, rather than being a telco or a regulated industry CISO, because we have the compliance-driven. That helps. So I mean, and that's a problem statement. How to really convince to the top management in a non-regulated industry about a security investment?
Yeah, I think if I just very quickly comment on the role of the CFO and how it has grown. In for most functions, the first kick comes from compliance and regulatory driven needs that give rise to that function. Then people start seeing the advantages of it and it will start becoming much more rampant. But I remember 10, 12, 15 years ago, lots of companies didn't have a CFO. When you start to list, so the differences between listed companies and non-listed companies, or companies where regulations are far more important, or depending on where you're operating. But today it's almost the norm. The first person that most companies will appoint will be somebody in the area of finance. And I think the first push will come from compliance, and then it starts moving to business needs, strategic needs, competitiveness, and all differentiator, all kinds of things.
So, Anuradha, I have a view on the role of the CISO.
Yes.
I think we need to put it in two distinct categories. One are organizations on BFSI, telcos, which have kind of come up the maturity curve. And then there is a whole lot of other organizations where this function is building up steam. My view is that due to what is happening at a macro level, a lot of this stuff is getting commoditized. A lot of social media is enabling open sharing of information, etc. I feel that the ones that are already matured, the role of the CISO will probably take a diminishing return unless the CISO's role is expanded significantly, not just in the domain of end-to-end security, but much beyond that. From a perspective of business risk or from a perspective of overall internal audits, it needs to go beyond that. Else, I believe that it will go into a diminishing returns.
And why are you saying that? I mean, is there something else that triggers that thought in your head?
A lot of this, see today, maybe about 5 years back, when you looked at managed services for security, it was predominantly around managing the infrastructure around security. Today, when you look at managed services for security, it goes much beyond that. There'll be all around business risk assessments, around audits, around self-assessments. It covers the entire hog. Now, once a lot of this stuff starts getting commoditized and probably outsourced, thus the role will be limited to governing that activity, like what you do in IT today, right? A lot of this stuff is getting commoditized.
Are you saying that the CIO's role has diminishing returns and the CFO's role has diminishing returns? Because that's the trend.
In terms of the scope, the role of a CIO, gone are the days when the CIO would be concerned a lot about what's happening around the help desk, I guess. But today, that being an outsourced function, his role is more on the governance of that.
That's okay.
I guess I'm just trying to draw that distinction.
So you are saying what is reflected here, that management's expectations of a CISO, CISOs have to grow into that role.
Absolutely.
Fast.
So maybe I'll just add there.
Yeah.
I've seen a trend ever since the Clause 49 came into being. I think lots of companies are placing a lot of importance to business risks and they're getting it audited. And I've seen 2 or 3 cases where these CISOs were involved in the other business risk areas as well, not particularly IT. So that maybe could be the trend as time goes along.
I think it's also what Burgess was saying, right? That you have to look at new areas that you can assume responsibilities for and grow into your role. Any other?
Manish,
yes.
I don't agree completely with what my colleague said here, that there's going to be a diminishing return for CISOs who are maturing in the role. Because I don't think it's a function of the role. It's a function of the organization as a whole and also the business that they are in. Yes, as he correctly points out, the way the technology has moved, the way the roles are getting refined, there may be the perception that will develop that there is less for the CISO to do, but that is not actually the case. Because yes, it has been correctly brought out that the ability to understand business and integrate security strategy with it, but that's been there around since day one. It's just a matter of how the VED, vital, essential, desirable, how vital, how essential, how desirable was the CISO's involvement considered by the senior management. Going ahead, as the organization matures, yes, they will want him or her to add more value, but the basics never change because security is always a moving target.
Yeah, that's true, the new reality. Yes, I have to close in, I've been shown the sign several times. So last question and then we'll close.
If you see the last year survey and this year survey, there is one interesting point. Last year, security alignment with business strategy all were like below 50%.
Sorry, I can't
security alignment with business strategy, last year figures when you projected in Pune were less than 50%.
Yes.
This year, all those CXO's views and CSO's view is more than 70%. It's a very positive trend.
Big change.
Big change.
Yes, absolutely. And if you think back to 4 years ago, the percentage of companies that had a CISO was less than 20%, designated CISO. So that I can confirm to you because our database is growing. So designated CISOs are on the rise, that much I know. I just want to end with one last question because we haven't covered it in our survey, which is on security spend. Just to get a sense of, you know, when people say put your money where your mouth is, have any of you seen a dip in security spends in your, how many of you have seen a growth in security budgets in your company this year?
Good.
So that's about 35%?
Yeah, close.
How many of you static? Like no growth, no cuts? And how many of you have seen cuts? No, 50% of the people are not answering this question. So can everybody please answer this question? No, most people are seeing budget cuts on most things, so please don't feel embarrassed raising your hands if you've seen a budget cut. So would it be fair for me to assume that roughly 55 to 60% of the people in this room have seen budget cuts on security? That's not correct. So please can all of you make the effort and no budget cuts. Okay, so that's about 40%?
Yeah, more than that.
And increase in security budgets? That's another 30%.
Yeah, 35%.
So that seems more like it. People who are here who represent our partners, you know, you get your business from these guys. Does this reflect the reality of the market? Manohar, who else is here? Oracle, IBM, Ojas.
So I have just one question from the business side, in the sense addressing to the need of DRC. Is currently the setting of the budgets compliance or regulation driven, or is it business strategy driven?
I can tell you this. I don't think you need to ask the room. It is compliance and governance driven. It is need driven. I think need driven budgets are, my view, having run these surveys and talking to CISOs and vendors, is that the days when somebody would cut corners on compliance are reducing drastically. So where security spends are driven by compliance or mandatory needs, there the budgets will grow and meet those needs. I think the strategic requirements had seen an uptick 3 years ago and 2 years ago, but I think the economy has done its bit for it this year, where people who were coming out proactively to say, let me up my budgets for strategic needs, I think that's taken a dip. I don't know whether you agree or disagree. Agree? Strategic spends on security have taken a little bit of a hit?
Hello. And the way I look at it, see, when we say compliance, compliance essentially doesn't mean that it is a regulatory compliance itself. The organization's approach towards security also has changed in a big way. So earlier, if we were saying, okay, it was a SOX requirement or a particular 49 coming in, that was the only driver to get the money for it. But now that has changed a lot, because the organization understand, okay, we need to have to ensure the confidentiality of the data of our customers. Or our policy says that, because if I go back and say our policy says that we need to have adequate control at this and this area, the management is ready to listen and say, okay, we need to comply with that policy. So it is end of the day compliance, but not driven by a regulatory alone.
Okay. Okay, do people agree with that? That even if it is not regulatory or mandated by rules of the land, there is still scope to get your management to agree to spends, security spends? Yes? Raise it high. Okay, so that's a substantial number.
Yeah.
So very heartening.
That's a proactive approach.
Huh? That's a proactive. Yes, yes. No, I think to me that's the most heartening thing to see in the way the CSO's role and the approach to enterprise security, that there is a consistent upward movement in the importance that is awarded and the money that is sanctioned to actually reflect that strategic change. So with that, I guess that sets the tone very nicely for what we have to achieve between now and tomorrow afternoon. I have to close the session, but yes. Lost.
Sector and private sectors.
Next year.
Still a long way to go for the public sector to go into the...
Good point, good point. I think maybe we will just do a specific survey with the public sector and then contrast it with the overall findings. So maybe we can take that on as something to do during the year.
Good session. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to close the session. Please join me in thanking our panelists, and thank you all of you.